Welcome to the Siwike podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The Siwike podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Siwike Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. We're here again with our guest host, Michael Fearon, and we thought we'd have a discussion on building skills during times of recession or economic downturn. So how are you doing today, Michael?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic as always. So we're not officially in a recession right now, but there's a lot of talk about, well, it's definitely a low point in the market right now. So in any times, not even just in low market times, it's always good to be kind of a lifelong learner and continuously keeping up your skills. We want to talk specifically about, like, during this time, let's take an opportunity to build your skills and capitalize on that. So as we were kind of building the outline for the show, we want to talk a little bit about planning your strategy. So for first, one of the things that we want to be mindful of is what skills are we actually referring to? And calling that out. So what would be some of the categories of skills that we would want to develop during a recession or any time?
Well, I think during any time, I know right now there's lots of talks about recession and slowdowns, and there's lots of fear in the world. And because of that, I think it's always a good time to look at what you have. And you have all sorts of skills. You have both your soft skills, just how you communicate and talk to people and interact. You have your hard skills, I guess I'd say, or your technical skills. So things that you've learned, ability to work with different software, different tools. And then beyond that as well, you have just your life skills. People underestimate how much just life teaches you all kinds of management skills and all kinds of other skills that you wouldn't necessarily think of, but are really useful at any time during your career or at any point during your career.
For sure. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Always the internet delays. And as you move between different roles and as you transition to roles and as you look for new things, I think it's really helpful to just look back at all the things that you have accomplished and all the skills that you do have and make a basket of it. Just have a collection of skills that you can use for different kinds of jobs applications or different kind of opportunities that you're looking for.
For sure. So what I'm hearing is basically, as you plan your strategy, is get an understanding of which types of skills or what skills you want to develop. So you mentioned the hard and the technical skills. So a lot of boot camps and micro credentials or online courses can help you with learning how to code or like AI, machine learning, cybersecurity, or what have you, right? All those technical skills. But that's not to be encompassed or eclipsed by like soft skills, where like, are you an effective communicator? Are you good at time management, building relationships, or things like that? And I think that the life skills is one. Well, are there soft skills or life skills? I bucket life skills as things like, are you healthy physically? Like, are you eating right? Are you sleeping? are you exercising? That sort of stuff. Because when those things don't get taken care of, then a whole bunch of other things. And obviously there's a whole mindset game where like, are you like meditating and mindful and all that sort of stuff? There's a whole bunch of things. So it's a matter of chronicle and inventorying which one do you want to focus on. And you could probably do them all, but probably not at the same time, right? So you might want to pick one or two things to focus on at any given time. And I think what you said is important about having that basket of skills. And I think we talked about calling it like auditing your skills, like, and with all the things that you want, what do you already have? And maybe you want to get to a 7 out of 10 at any of them, 8 out of 10 at any of them, but are you a 0 or are you a 5, right? How far are you on the spectrum to do that? So I think that's a great thought.
Yeah, I do really think that you have to kind of know yourself. Mm-hmm. You have to know where you are to figure out where you're going. You can't just pick a direction and kind of just run off, because you don't necessarily grab the skill, or you don't necessarily put the practice in, I like to say, or do the hours towards getting those kind of requirements that will bump you to where you want to be. I really think about it from the sense of auditing skills. I tend to be not a great network person. Put me in a room, and sometimes I'll perform amazingly and hit it off great, and other times it's not my vibe. Because of that, I kind of come up with a really good strategy of really trying to know where do you excel and what environments give you the chance to showcase what you have. Because you can have amazing technical skills and then be in a very social environment where you need a lot of social skills and it just won't translate. Or vice versa. You can be in a really, be a very mentally sound person, very, very thoughtful, very meditative, very understanding of your environment, and then be put into an environment that requires a lot of technical analysis of the environment, of an environmental scan, or very, very credential focused. And that doesn't translate across. But you have to find your environment where your skills and your best fit allows you to jump across. So I think of when I transitioned between being a teacher or doing my teaching degree to disaster management. And a lot of people go like, okay, these things are very different. One, you're in a classroom teaching. I did grade, so high school, so grade 9 through 12. So that one, bunch of young adults in a classroom, teaching them through a lesson, which they may or may not want to be with. I did history and geography, so some people are mandatorily have to be there, and some people just love it. Right. And then I jumped over to disaster management, which is thinking about how do we make resiliency for either a community or an organization or a business. And pretty much to do the two things, they look completely different, but there's lots of intersects. Both of them, you're doing a lot of planning. Both of them, you're thinking about communication and relationship building, whether that's with students in a classroom or if that's with a community partner. Both of those things are really building relationships. How do you talk to them? How do you communicate? And also I had to do technical skill training. I had to go back to school, and I ended up doing a certificate at Sheridan and then going on to doing my master's in disaster management. So there's all the spread of activities that comes along, but you can only do that if you audit yourself and figure out where am I, and come up with an idea or a vision of where do I want to be.
For sure. The expression "know thyself" comes to mind, and there's definitely a benefit in understanding that, because what it can do is, well, definitely give you the direction where you're starting from, but also, as you mentioned, some of the overlaps, and you actually might realize that, oh, I'm actually further than I thought, because there's these other things that gave me a whole bunch of skills which aren't on the surface directly relatable, but if I apply it in a certain context, it's much more transferable. So you can quickly identify like the amount of work that you have, and you might actually be further ahead. I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about, as you're kind of figuring out which skills do you want, so that now that you know where you are, how much do you kind of look into the market, new skills out there, like whatever's hot, and follow the trends? Or is it just something more, do you look for like the future-proof, the tried and tested ones? Or so how much do you look at like changes in the market versus like absolutely new skills that you need to develop?
That's a good question. I'm a chronic looker for new skills. I never stop, and I never stop looking for new things. That's just a personality trait. Also, from the perspective of my personal journey, from being dyslexic, I'm always looking for new tools to help me write better and write faster. And a lot of, well, modernly with, we have chat GBT, and we have all these cool tools coming out. You pretty much start just gathering a bunch of information, just see what's out there. And what I tend to look for is the connection between things that don't seem to be related. So a great example of this is I'll use a disaster management one, and then I'll use one from something completely unrelated. Actually, from my experience in the Army, I'll do those two ones because it's two very different environments, and also you get to see how there's weird connections where people don't normally think about, where there's lots of interesting opportunity. So I would look at education and disasters. That's what I focused on for most of my master's program. And what I was really looking at, how do you restart education programs after you've had a disaster? That was the thing that I was always interested in. Because pretty much if you have a disaster, your schools are wiped out, all the children and all the young adults are now at home, and now parents have to stay home to monitor and see what's going on. So one of the fastest way to re-jump a community is have engaging education programs turn back on so that everybody's young adults and children are being taken care of, which enables all the remaining adults in the community to do other tasks or focus on other areas. So all of a sudden, you've created people going to work out of creating an education program. It's not something that you think of as a direct connection, but that's a spin-off effect. And on the other side, when I I joined the Army in 2018 as a reservist. I pretty much joined as a human resource administrator.
Okay.
And the thing that nobody thinks of when they think about the Army is the massive amount of human resources and financial planning that needs to go into making this massive organization work. And it's the part that is chronically understaffed because nobody thinks about going into that occupation, into that profession, looking at it from a perspective of HR and human capital development or from financial responsibility. So all of a sudden, you can find all these interesting niches that exist in all the markets that are functions that are universal to all organizations, but are often undermanned or understaffed just because nobody thinks of going into that area from that viewpoint. So that's how I kind of look at it. I kind of go like, look around, see what's out there, experiment, try to figure out where the puck is going, not where the puck is, and try to move accordingly that way.
So what I took from that is even if you're going into the market or trying to find skills that are hot because it's kind of the next buzzword or whatever, there's always some, or there's often some underlying commonalities where the connections may not seem as direct on the surface, but if you can kind of find, well, why is it hot? What can I bring to the table? And even in a totally different context. And, oh, this is where I add a unique value where seemingly they're unrelated, but I can kind of add my own interest in there. So in lieu of focusing what's on hot. So it's really just personal preference, either focus on what's hot, but instead of just doing it for the sake of doing it, because you can make a lot of money, you get a job easily, look at one step below and say, okay, what are the connection points? What are some of the background that I can add value to it? Because that'll help you kind of stay in it more than when the next fad or the next thing comes in. And then you're like, I just spent 2 years training for this thing and then the puck moved. Right?
Yeah. And then
that sort of thing.
It's, always, I kind of go, by the time I hear about it in people that are like in the general population as a main thought, the puck is actually moving somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's what I kind of imagine happening always. This isn't always true, but it's what I always imagine. So I always go like, okay, I see a tool that exists. I was gonna pick one. Okay, let's do ChatGPT because everybody likes talking about it and it's trendy. This exists. Great. It's a cool database system that kind of pulls information that correlates it into a nice report at the end and gives you a nice template. Okay. Interesting. What's the underlying motion that's driving this? Is it the augmentation of people with machine learning? So it's allowing us to do more critical thinking and then have templates generated so that it augments our ability? Is it a productivity thing? Or is it more about the general idea of communication? And if I want to be on the communication sides of it, then I should really look at how is that going to augment my work or make my work faster. If I want to be on the developer side of it, it's going, how does it work? How do we maintain it? How do we update? Where does it pull information from? How do we vet the information? So then you see these little areas that are actually a spin-off of the main thing, which everybody's looking at. Look at how cool the software is, or look at how cool the AI is, not going, what are the other avenues that this affects that are opportunities for either for me to put thought towards because I'm a thoughtful person, put my technical skills toward because I'm a technical person, or even use my interpersonal skills because it becomes a sales item for like pitching it to other people. So like that's how I try to look at and think about the future of the labor market. It's go, where is it going? What are the underlying currents? And where do I fit in that underlying current? Or where do I want to fit in this thing? Do I want to be on the top of the current, riding on the top of the wave? Or do I want to be swimming underneath the current?
Right.
Where do I want to sit?
For sure. And what I took from that is if you decide to go follow the current, there are still unique strengths that you can apply to it, which might be tangential, above, in the middle, or below the current, as you were saying in the analogy. So just make sure that you kind of pick where you fit best, because otherwise you're competing against other people that are going to be way better at whatever they are. So you should also focus on your strengths and how you apply it as well. I'm wondering if you could chat a little bit about like, given that everything's kind of digital online, social media is kind of huge, and we're all staying connected there. What are your thoughts about like maintaining your digital presence and updating, keeping your resume updated and things like that? What are your thoughts on that as you build your skill set?
I've learned as time goes on, updating your resume more and more is becoming just a task on its own, a task that you just need to do. I used to always go once a year. I'd review my CV, and I'm finding that in my work life, there's new performance management aspects that are coming out, and new internal LinkedIn equivalents becoming a thing. So I'm turning into updating my LinkedIn, my CV, and also updating my performance metrics internally as well. So it's just updating and documenting what you're doing and what you've done, and even things that you might not necessarily think are things that are worth noting. It's I ran a community barbecue the other day. It's documenting those skills and seeing how much value you've added to either your community, your environment, and how lots of organizations would really need those skills, whether it's the coordinating aspect, the planning aspect, the managing the cost of the barbecue, the people interactions, the customer service aspect, or just the community mobilization. There's so many aspects to it that I go, you nearly need to be doing at a minimum 4 times a year updates on just your presence, your social media presence, whether that's your LinkedIn or other service, and also on your personal CV and your skill documentation. Just because life happens so quickly now, and before you know it, you're doing so many things and you forget that you did really cool things.
For sure. What I took from that is what came to mind is the thought of kind of like career hygiene, in the sense that when you have your annual review and you have to kind of update the performance management documents and things like that, well, why not take a little bit of time to update your LinkedIn, update your resume as well, just because they're all interrelated. And not just the once a year when you have to do it, but maybe once a season, every three months, maybe once a quarter, because sometimes what you feel is significant in a week, in a month, is not as significant in the time frame of a year or 5 years if you decide to find a new job. So doing it consistently over time will help say, okay, yeah, this company picnic that was 50 people, that still takes a lot of planning to do. But if you looked at it 5 years from now, it's like, oh, it's this kind of little tiny speck that you don't give yourself credit to. But all those little things add up over time. So I use a concept called a career document, which is almost like your super resume, where you outline all these the little nitty gritties, where it's not limited to like 2 pages as a resume is, but really inventorying all the things you do, and then you pick and choose in the future which ones are relevant. So I think that's great to really take note of the things, the skills that you've developed that might help you in the future. I'd love if you talked a little bit about expanding your network. So you mentioned that you're not a great networker sometimes, and sometimes you are. But as a skill, it seems like that expanding your network is a skill on its own that everyone should really develop, and part of it expanding your network. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh yeah. So I don't consider myself the greatest networker yet. Work in progress. Everyone has their areas. Only because I find I'm very environmentally dependent. So I fare better in different environments. I'm pretty good on one-on-one situations. So in which case, I tend to do a lot of informationals. Either on LinkedIn, I will reach out to people in my field, or I will reach out to my region, my immediate reports, or my manager, or through other contacts, and have those coffee talks, or have a pass by to the office to say, what's it like to do this role? What's involved in this? This is kind of what I'm interested in. So I do that because you put me in a crowd or some networking events where you have 200 people in a room, and everybody goes like, okay, we've had a great speaker to talk. Let's stand up and meet your immediate neighbors. I get overwhelmed by people. I'm just like, there is too much happening. it's an area to work on, and I'll continue working on. But what I'd say is try to pick your networking events or your networking environments that go best with your skill set, and so that you can maximize the value that you can get out of it, and you can maximize your ability to communicate what you're interested in, what you're looking forward to going to, and also what you want to learn. So I always go be very clear on those concepts, and from that, know yourself to choose the best environment for you. Some people love the massive, larger boardroom, larger networking events because they like the variety.
Mm-hmm.
So I know some people that just like, I don't like doing the small ones. I kind of want to get a buffet of what's out there. So I need at least 100 people around so I can hop around and talk to people and see where everybody's at. I prefer the smaller version, but I go know where you're at and just work at it and constantly just talk to people, practice your elevator pitch, and just have discussions.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a nail on the head when you said about know yourself, right? Because you're good at networking. You just haven't necessarily put yourself in enough of those instances to develop that skill, right? Because I usually tell folks it's not that it's hard or you're not good at it. You're just new, right? So if you haven't had like 100 coffee chats or informational interviews or whatever, like how good would you be at it, right? So the first time, like you walked, right, you were falling left, right, and center, right? And it probably after the 100th, 200th time, then you got pretty decent at it, right? That sort of thing. And when you say informationals, I assume you're talking about like informational interviews and having those like coffee chats, Zoom chats, and stuff like that. One perspective that I've often been sharing with folks is to change that word, because informational interview sounds like, well, I'm trying to get a job from them, and that's not necessarily the intent. So I encourage folks to think of it as a curiosity conversation, like
That's a really good one, yeah.
Yeah. So how interesting is this person? What are you curious about? What are you interested in? What excites you about it? And can you tease that out of them? Because, hey, that might be something that you want to do. Hey, they might have some suggestions if you want to get into that area. So following that curiosity is often helpful. And as you said, in the environment that you like, one-on-one, 100-on-1, whatever it is.
Whichever one you want to go for.
Yeah, or anywhere in between. And sometimes it's a skill to develop where, I mean, I self-identify as an introvert and I prefer the smaller gatherings too, but I do pretty well in a large gathering just because I've trained myself to be able to do that. Now, after that gathering, I'm spent and I have to brush the sweat off my forehead. I'm like, whew, I need to recover. But it's one where if you want to, you can develop the skills on either side as well, right? So
yeah.
I think that's great. So
that has been always my thing for like large events. After I'm exhausted, I'm just like, oh my gosh, there was too many people. I don't know, why do people enjoy this? I'm just in that role, which actually brings me to an interesting point, which you just reminded me of a second story, which I think is one of the most valuable things I ever learned from any job. But I did it for actually one day. This was my one-day career as a door-to-door salesperson. So pretty much door-to-door sales, everyone used to be a thing. I don't know if people still do this. You go around, you knock on people's door and you go, hey, would you like to buy this product? I hated it because it involves me going out to talk to random people and feel like I'm interrupting their day. But the lesson I took from it, it was an interesting thing that they did the day before. The day before, they had a whole session. And the one thing that they taught was attitude maintenance. And pretty much the idea was you're going to go door to door and you're going to get so many no's. You need some way to keep your spirits up, keep your motivation up. So what you should do is find a specific book or a song that keeps you motivated and, have it with you so that as you face all this rejection, you can turn to it and you can be encouraged to go on. And although I didn't necessarily use it right there in the day, it's something that stuck with me for everything going forward, in the sense that to be effective at networking, job applications, auditing your skill, all this stuff, to do everything, you need some way of maintaining your attitude to keep it at a positive level, and having those things that are encouragements to you are very, very critical. You don't necessarily need them with you on your person right at the moment as you're doing that to pull it out, but to have that after, to know how to do that, it's a key skill that goes along well with all of this.
For sure. I think that's very important. And I was chatting with someone on the importance of self-care. So this is what it reminds me of in the sense of like having a book or a song or something that energizes you throughout the day. Because unfortunately, your energy reserves get depleted like a battery, that sort of thing. But if you put on that song, then maybe your battery recharges back to like past low power mode or whatever, and then
Yeah,
back to
the
normal
power save.
operating, and then yeah, power save mode, that sort of thing. And then like then it drains back down to the yellow, and then you I don't know, eat your favorite food or talk to a family member or do something that energizes you, and then it goes back up, and then it depletes again, that sort of thing. So adding that self care portion, I think, is super helpful. And I'm reminded of a quote where it says something along the lines of, most of the time we don't do too much, we do too little of what lights us up. So if we have those constant reminders of those little things that light us up, then we can kind of keep going as well. And I'd love if you chat a little bit about, okay, as we kind of look ahead, what about being aware of what else is out there? Because you might be in business, in technology, in whatever you're in. Should we be looking around to other areas, or should we be sticking to our niche? And what about all the change? Because change is inevitable.
Yeah.
What about managing those things as well?
Well, yeah, right now is an interesting time. Actually, I would say generally across a lot of like global labor markets as well. In Canada and Ontario in particular, because we're here, we are facing serious labor shortages in certain fields. The medical field has major shortages. Some of the other services, well, actually, for the most part, we generally have across the board lots of organizations that are desperately looking for people to fill all sorts of roles. And pretty much the main challenge with it is, one, not everybody's thinking about those roles, or not everybody's thinking about those areas as areas that they would necessarily want to jump into off the bat. I know in government side, it is a conversation. There's a challenge of attracting new talent. Most of the organizations work for currently are in some form of acute labor shortage, or needing for people to come in and needing people to be interested in the occupation. But for a lot of people, when people think of jobs of the future, they think of, yes, the software engineer fields. They think of that as being a big growing area that everybody goes for. They do think of some of the sales fields as well as an area. The trades are always hurting for people. If you're a more tactile person, that area always is looking for more people to come in. So I think we're in an interesting transition point. My optimistic side of me goes towards thinking we're going to be in a stage where there might be nearly too much opportunity. You might not know what to choose from to go.
Okay.
I know it might not seem like that now, but we're in the middle of a lot of interesting trends that are happening. Demographically, we're going to have an aging population that's going to be stepping out of the workforce, and stepping out of the workforce in all levels of organizations, from junior to senior management, from even line work. It's just the way the population chart goes. That's what's going to happen. And I don't know yet, and I don't think most people know yet, what that's going to impact for presenting opportunities and all the jobs that will just become, oh my gosh, this was critical for society to run. I know there's the obvious of healthcare, which we're in desperate need of more nurses and doctors. But along with that, there's all these supporting elements to allow healthcare to work. There's healthcare informatics, for example, which is doing all the data analysis, building all the networks and the systems that enable patient care to happen. That includes process reengineering, lean project management, all that stuff. There's the financial aspect of it. How do we finance this entire thing? The HR aspect, and also the learning and development aspect. So that even if you're not a RN, a nurse practitioner, a doctor, that doesn't strike your fancy. There's all these other roles that are also healthcare related, but aren't necessarily what we think of as healthcare. So I think there's going to be a lot of interesting new opportunities coming out, and I think it's going to be about, or the race will be how or who can position themselves to acquire the skills and acquire the right combination of skills. And then the stepping part after that is who is going to keep themselves mentally in the game long enough to realize all that growth potential.
For sure. And what I took from that is, I mean, there are so many industries, companies that are looking for folks, right? And sometimes whatever area that you're in may not be like the hot commodity of the day, that sort of thing. But oftentimes your skills are good enough where you can transition into something else. What comes to mind is kind of like the start of COVID, like hospitality just took a nosedive, right? Because nobody was allowed out. But supply chain was like up the roof because everybody needed their packages delivered and things like that, right? The movement of goods needed to still happen, right? So now could you retool yourself and move over to that? Well, a wait staff being like an Amazon warehouse picker, well, I mean, like they're not that different from each other, but they're very different from each other, right? So it's one of those things where if you actually look between the lines, you probably are skilled with a lot of things, as you kind of mentioned with like well, you're not a doctor, but I can do like data stuff. I'm not a nurse, but I can do like administration of something, right? So there's all sorts of different opportunities. So what I'm taking from that is just be more open-minded. So in addition to knowing yourself, being open-minded to what could your fundamental skill set, not necessarily just what your title needs to be in the future. So I think that's great. And as we start to close off this episode, because I think there's tons more that we could talk about building your skill sets. Just to summarize in a little bit, one is to kind of plan your strategy. Like, well, what is it that you actually want to learn? And then do a bit of an audit, know yourself to see where you are so that you can figure out how far you need to go. And then the last bit is actually to go ahead and pick a skill to learn. Having lots of conversation, expanding your network as a result, and thinking more broadly about where your skills could be applied in the future or right now. So any other stuff I wish I knew earlier or comments that you'd want to share about building your skills during an economic downturn or just all the time, actually?
Just all the time. I think beyond that, just stay curious. That is where I would go with it. If I could come up with an overarching thing, and just stay curious, look for opportunity, because you miss 100% of the chances you don't take.
For sure. Yeah. Good old Wayne Gretzky quote thrown in there. And yeah, stay curious, take on the skill of being a lifelong learner and always constantly adjusting yourself, reinventing yourself. It doesn't have to be a full reinvention. It could be just a small tweak, learn something new each day, and that following that curiosity could be super helpful. So thanks, Michael, for sharing your insights, and hopefully we'll have you back in a future episode.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you for having me.
Take care. Thanks for joining us on the Siwike Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Lukidanu, Lukidanu, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.